Welcome back to Close Up. We've already had one Colorado politician jump into the race for Democratic presidential nomination, but there may still be another. U.S. Senator Michael Bennet is here in New Hampshire making some campaign-style stops, and he's our guest this morning. Senator Bennet, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to see you.
We've got this huge and growing Democratic presidential candidate field. If you were to decide to get in, what would be your lane, and how would you stand out?
I think that I've had a different set of experiences than most of the people in the race. I was in business before I was in politics. I know some people view that as a negative in a Democratic primary. I don't share that view. I was a school superintendent after that for an urban district, for Denver, for the Denver Public Schools for 5 years. Spent more time in classrooms and in business than any of the other candidates. So I think that brings a different perspective. My work in the Senate has been attempting, when I can, to find bipartisan solutions to tough problems like immigration. And I think what we need to do is use this as an opportunity. We have an incredible opportunity in this country to change our direction, to focus on the lack of economic mobility that we have in our country, the inability of people to be able to rise from one economic station to the other. But only if we focus on that are we actually going to not just beat Donald Trump, but figure out how to govern the country again and restore our democratic institutions. That's a lot to do. That's a big agenda. And I think it's one where we can't be distracted by every single press release that goes out every single day.
One of your other jobs was as chief of staff for John Hickenlooper.
Yeah.
Are your politics that different than his? I mean, he's already running.
I think our approach to politics is different, and our experience is very different. He was the governor of my state. I think he did a great job as governor. I'm glad he's running for president. I think it's great to have his voice in this conversation. I've spent the last 10 years in the Senate seeing firsthand the corruption that's down there and the ways in which our political system are broken and not going to deliver for the next generation of Americans unless we address those. I think it would be very hard for somebody who doesn't have some understanding of that to be able to attack it in the way that it needs to be attacked. But I'm glad he's running. I think he'll be a great candidate. He was a great governor and a great mayor and a great boss.
And this is a concern he raised, but it's a question we're asking too. Do you think right now that the Democratic Party is being pulled too far to the left?
I think we're being pulled too far in whatever direction by whatever happens to be on the cable television last night, by whatever press releases go out. I think people don't have a sense really for what Democrats stand for, and I think what we stand for is making sure that in America, when you work hard, your family can live a middle-class lifestyle and you can leave something to the next generation of Americans. And that's getting drowned out by a bunch of stuff that may or may not help us achieve those goals. I think we need people in this race that are going to keep our focus on that question, just as Sherrod Brown did, you know, who is a colleague of mine that I really cherish in the Senate, who decided not to run yesterday. He ran a successful campaign in the middle of the country in Ohio when everybody else was losing that was a Democrat, because he lifted up the dignity of work. And coming from Colorado, it's a similar perspective that we have.
You talk about the cable news and the social media. You know, one of the reasons people know you, and there's some irony here.
There's a lot of irony here.
Yeah, that you had this moment on the Senate floor when you kind of took Ted Cruz to the woodshed over the government shutdown.
Right.
So does that moment, you know, even though you're worried about this influence of cable news, does that moment though give you more credibility with Democratic voters?
Well, it certainly introduced me to a lot of people who didn't know me. I haven't spent a lot of time on the cable. I haven't spent a lot of time trying to get my name known. I've just been trying to work on behalf of my state, which is a third Republican, a third Democratic, and a third independent. You know, that creates real complexity as you're trying to sort through the kind of problems that we face, and trying to do something useful for the next generation of Coloradans and Americans. I mean, the kids in the Denver Public Schools, many of whom don't have the chance they should have to be able to move on to a better life. That's the stuff I'm focused on, and it is ironic that I end up, for a guy who is thought to be as mild-mannered as I am and not a flashy person, and I'm none of those things, it is ironic that that's become the most watched Senate speech in American history. Another irony is that I accused Ted Cruz of having used the Senate floor to ride it all the way to what I called a second-place finish in Iowa. He actually won Iowa, so I apologize for screwing that up. But But I think the reason it resonated was that I said something that was on a lot of people's minds, which is we are not going to get where we need to go as a country doing the politics we've done for the last 10 years. It's not possible. And in this democratic republic of ours, we have a responsibility as citizens to elevate this political discussion, to put this miserable, shameful political discussion behind us, and not just beat Donald Trump, which I think is critical to our country, but to actually be able to govern again and be able to create an economy again where when the economy grows, it's not a recession for the middle class. Middle class income actually goes up, and folks that aren't yet middle class see their income rise as well. It's been 40 years since that's been true in our country. And we can't accept the idea that it can't be fixed because of globalization, or it can't be fixed because of technology, or it can't be fixed because of China. The American people, certainly the people of Colorado, and I'll bet the people of New Hampshire, don't accept that. And they know that in Washington we have made no effort to try to address it. And I think that's what this campaign should be about.
Another conversation dominating Washington right now is this anti-hate resolution that was over there in the Congress, and the comments from Representative Omar, tweets actually that go back a while now. She has tweeted about Israel hypnotizing the world. She made a reference to the influence of Jewish money in politics. She's also talked about dual allegiance, this idea that American Jews may have an allegiance to Israel and America. This has created a fissure in the Democratic Party in terms of whether people stand with her or not. It's my understanding you're the grandson of Holocaust survivors, so you have a unique perspective here. Where do you stand on what she said?
So what I would say is she shouldn't have said what she said. I condemn what she said. My mom and her parents were survivors of the Holocaust, except for an aunt. All of the rest of them were killed. And they lived for 2 years behind the Iron Curtain after the war was over. And then they went to Stockholm for a year in Sweden. They went to Mexico for a year, Mexico City actually. And then they came to New York City to rebuild their shattered lives. They believed this was the only country in the world where they could have done that. And there's good reason for them to believe that, because we are a pluralistic society. We welcome people under the circumstances that my grandparents and my mom came here. My mom was the only one who could speak English. She enrolled herself in a public school. And my grandparents, who had the strongest accents of anybody I've ever met, and Colorado is full of immigrants that have strongest accents of anybody I've ever met, were the greatest patriots that I have ever known. And they would be so dismayed by our inability now in America to address the challenges that we face. They believed this was the greatest country in the world. This was a country that had saved them. This was a country where you could come from someplace else speaking a different language, your business destroyed, your lives destroyed, and restart. And in one generation, they were able to pay for my education and my siblings' education. So that's what our country is about. It's not about this daily grind that who's up and who's down in Washington. I think we need to get back to it. It's tough. It is tough, because that stuff is on every night for 3 hours a night, and the Twitter feeds are relentless and eternal, and we haven't figured out how to use social media to actually express our constructive citizenship. There's no reason that can't be true, but we haven't figured it out yet. And I hope during this presidential campaign we're able to conduct it in a way that restores American faith in our ability to govern. You know, and when I think about the example of my grandparents, it's not hard for me to see what the essence of our country is, rather than what these, distractions are.
These detention centers on the southern border. Does anyone in the government who implemented this policy, should they be facing consequences up to and including jail for what's going on?
Well, I don't know enough to say if they should go to jail, but I think, look, I had to apologize to my daughter, Helena, who's named, by the way, for her Polish-Jewish grandmother, Helena Kledgman. I was sitting in a car with her one day when the news came on that the United States of America, that our government, in the name of the American people, was separating children from their parents at the border. And I said, Helena, I am so sorry, because the country that I grew up in when I was your age, our government would never have thought to do such a thing. So what we should be doing is figuring out how to restore kids and their families together, how to make sure that we're not breaking up families. It should not be the policy of the United States to break up families. And we should be working with Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador to figure out how to restore some sense of order and rule of law in those countries so that people don't have to flee for their lives, which is what's happening right now. I went down there to meet with people down there to find out what it would take, because I'm a parent of 3 daughters, what it would take for a parent down there to spend a year's salary or wages to put their kid in the hands of a drug dealer to smuggle them to the American border, knowing in many cases the kids would be violated and raped. And the answer is, when you live in a place where there is no opportunity and where gangs are going to kill you on the playground or in your neighborhood for not doing exactly what they're saying, this is what happens. This is our hemisphere. I think we can work with our allies in this region and stabilize this situation so that we don't have this continuous wave of refugees coming to the U.S. border.
Last question here. What's your timeline for deciding whether or not you're going to run for president?
My timeline is in the next few weeks. I am so happy to be in New Hampshire. It's already been great. I spent the morning with a group of kids working in the Manchester Public Schools through City Year, doing national service, which I think is one of those things that really binds us together as a country, and I'm looking forward to spending the rest of the day here as well. I'll let you know.
All right, Senator Bennett, we appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.